If you're a streamer, you probably have at least a few different social media accounts, and you're going to want to drive your viewers to your socials without coming across as too obnoxious, pushy, or desperate. So today I'm going to show you how to animate text in Blender to make a simple, clean social media pop-up that looks something like this that you can play occasionally throughout your stream. And you can use any logo here. The Twitch logo is just a hint to go follow my stream. All you have to do is download Blender, link in the description, and follow along. And if you enjoy these tutorials, the absolute best way to show your support for the channel is to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell. It's completely free, it really helps me out, and most importantly, it lets you know when there's cool new stuff to check out. That being said, let's get started. My name is Chris Folia, I'm your stream scholar. Welcome to StreamSchool. Alright, first things first, let's get our document set up for the animation. So I'm going to hop over to the camera tab right here. I'm going to go to where it says motion blur, and I'm going to click that checkbox because Eevee now supports object-based motion blur as of Blender 2.9. Then I'm going to hit the drop down and crank the steps up to around 12 just to make it look a bit nicer. Then I'm going to go to film, and I'm going to check the transparent box, so the background of our video will render out transparent. Then I'm going to hop down to color management and set the view transform from filmic to standard, so we get the full vibrant colors or values that we want. So then I'm going to hop over to the printer icon, and I'm going to set the frame rate to 60 since that's what most people stream at. Then for output, let's go ahead and hop down to the file format drop down, set that to FFmpeg video, go to encoding, set that to WebM, go to video codec and set that to WebM/VP9. I know I went through all of that a bit quickly, but I do have an entire video based on render settings if you're curious about the breakdown for that. Finally, we're going to want to set the color from black and white and from RGB to RGBA for red, green, blue, and alpha. And now we are ready to start. So I'm going to select the cube, hit delete, select the light, hit delete, select the camera, hit Alt-R to reset the rotation, Alt-G to reset the location. Then I'm going to grab my movement widget and I'm going to move it up just above the grid. It doesn't matter how far above the grid, just make sure it's above the grid, because the next step is to take the camera, go over to the camera settings, and we're going to set this to orthographic. So this means that things that get further away aren't going to get smaller. Anything within the camera field of view will always appear at the same flat size. So it's perfect for motion media. Then I'm going to hop over to the 3D viewport, go to the lower left-hand corner, click and drag to split that. Go to the lower left-hand corner again, click and drag up to split one more time. In the upper left-hand viewport, I'm going to go to View, Cameras, Active Camera, and that'll set us to the camera view. Then you'll notice that we have the grid, we have the toolbar, we have the 3D cursor and the orange outline, and we don't want any of that. We just want a nice rendered preview so we can see what our animation looks like as we're working on it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit T on my keyboard to hide the toolbar. Then I'm going to come up here, and where this little chain link looking icon is, I'm going to click that to hide all of the grid and everything. Then finally, to put this in rendered preview, I'm going to select this shiny circle button. Down here, I'm going to go to this button, and I'm going to go to the graph editor because we're going to use that to animate first. Then we're going to hop into the dope sheet. Now let's add our text and icon. So I'm going to go to add text, and that'll add a text object to the scene. If we hit 7 over here to go to the top view, you'll notice we have our text object. And if we hit G on our keyboard to move it, we can move it around. And because the camera is orthographic, the bounds of the camera match up with the bounds of this area over here. The text is hard to see because it's dark gray because we have no light in the scene. So we want the text to just be like a nice solid color as if we were doing something in After Effects or Photoshop. So we can go to the materials panel, hit new, and where we have surface, click that drop down and change this to an emission. That'll just make it a nice bright color. It starts out as white, but you can make this whatever color you want. I'm personally going to stick to white. You can also do texturing and stuff if you know how and want to. I'm going to stick to white for the sake of this tutorial. Finally, we want our actual social media handle that we're going to advertise. So I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode, backspace a bunch of times to get rid of the text. Then I'm just going to type Cfolia because I want to advertise my Twitter. Hit Tab again to go out of edit mode. And I don't particularly like this font, so I'm going to go to the text panel, click the font drop down, click a folder, and I'm going to find myself a font that I do like. I happen to have some Google fonts that I have downloaded, so I'm going to grab Open Sans, and I'm going to go for Open Sans Bold, I guess. That looks pretty good to me. I just really like this font. It's really clean. Finally, we want our social media icon, and I can't legally distribute these, I don't believe, but I'll link where you can find them in the description of this video. For the most part though, if you just Google site branding resources like YouTube brand resources or Twitter brand resources, it'll bring you right to a page where you can download any of their logos for use in stuff like this. So then I'm going to go to File, Import Images as Planes. If you don't have this option, you need to enable that. So you can do that under Edit, Preferences. You can go to Add-ons, and you can type the search bar, Images, and it'll probably be the only one. Check that, then go to File, Import Images as Planes, and it should be there. So I'm gonna hop over to where my Twitter logo is, which is right here. I'm gonna select that transparent PNG. I'm gonna make sure this is set from principled to emit. That'll make it solid color rather than shaded and affected by lights. And make sure that it is using alpha and all that stuff. Hit import images as planes, and now I have my beautiful Twitter logo. Gonna hit G for grab on my keyboard, move it down here next to my text. Get it all nice and lined up however you want it to appear on the bottom of the screen. So I'm personally going to select my text and my logo, and I'm going to hit S to scale these up to about the width of the camera boundary. The reason for this is we can scale this down in OBS as much as we want to. Just taking up the entire camera boundary is going to reduce the amount of transparent pixels that we have in OBS, which will save on processor. Just trust me on this one. But it doesn't really matter as long as it fits the bounds of the camera. Then we'll adjust the camera later to match our animation and our text. Regardless, I'm gonna match these up a little bit better, just by hitting S and G, S and G, S for scale, G for grab. Maybe move this over a little bit more, scale these up until I get something that I just generally like. And now we are going to animate it. And you'll notice immediately that we can't animate the individual letters of the text. And that's because Blender does not have a text animation system similar to After Effects built in. So we're gonna do it the manual way. It's a little bit tedious and not super easy, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun and you have a lot of creative freedom here. So we need to take this text and convert it to a mesh object. And we can do that by selecting it, going to Object, and we can say convert to mesh from curve meta surf text. And now if we hit tab to go into edit mode, you'll notice we no longer have control over modifying this as a text object. This is geometry. So make sure you have your text set to whatever you want it to be before you convert it to a mesh. But we can select individual vertices, move those around if we really want to. We probably don't want to, but then I'm gonna hit tab to hop out of the text, or actually I'm gonna hit tab to go back in. I'm going to hit A to select all of it. Then I'm gonna go to mesh, separate by loose parts. And if we hit tab to go back out of edit mode, you'll notice that we can select each individual letter as their own object now, which is exactly what we want to do a per character text animation. You will notice we do have one more problem to solve though, and that is that the origin of each individual letter is set to the lower left-hand corner, which is the original origin of the entire text object. That's a pretty easy fix, but what that means is if we rotate a letter, it's going to rotate around at that point. If we scale a letter, it's going to scale around that point, and that's really annoying. So we can select each of our letters by holding Shift and clicking them. And then we can go to Object, and we can go to, I'm pretty sure it's here. Yeah, Set Origin, and then Origin to Center of Mass. And that will set the origin to the center of the mass of each individual letter. So now we have a lot more control here. One last thing we want to do before we actually animate this is set the origin, or the transform pivot, to individual origins. What that means is by default this is set to median point. So if we select multiple items and hit S for scale, it's going to scale on the center of every individual object. However, if we change this drop down to individual origins, now if we hit S for scale, it's going to scale everything on their own individual origins, which is what we're going to want when we get to the animation of this. So finally, I'm going to select the logo as well. So we have everything selected, and then we want to animate this. So let's say we want to animate each letter individually popping up, like have the letters pop up, but on an offset from each other. We can do that pretty easily. So we'll hop over, let's say we want each of these to take about half a second to pop up. So we're gonna go to frame 30 by just clicking on frame 30. Then I'm going to drag, or I'm just gonna hit I on my keyboard for insert, and I'm going to select location to insert a location keyframe on each of the letters and the logo. Then I'm gonna go back to frame 1, and I'm going to click the green, I'm gonna use my movement widget to move these out of the camera frame. I'm gonna hit I on my keyboard and location. And I also have an entire tutorial that goes more in depth on how to use the graph editor, but I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. You will notice that as we scrub through our animation, it starts out slow, gets faster, and then slows down again. Since this is coming from off frame, we want to maximize the use of our keyframes and just have it start out fast and slow down as it comes on frame. And that's really easy to do on the graph editor. All we have to do is, first of all, on the graph editor, go to the little box with the circle in it, click it, and change it from bounding box center to individual origins. That way we're rotating, scaling, and moving keyframes based on their own individual centers. Then I'm going to hit Alt-A to deselect everything. I'm going to hit B to bring up my box select tool. Going to click and drag around the green keyframes. You know that the green ones are the ones that are being modified over time, the Y location, because you actually see a curve here. All the other ones are flat, which means nothing is happening with those. So then I'm going to hit R on my keyboard for rotate. I'm just going to rotate these keyframes like so. And you'll notice when I click to apply that, if we scrub through now, it starts out fast, goes up, and it slows down. Still doesn't slow down as much as I would like. So if we want to fix that and change that, I personally have different plans, but if we want to change that, we can hit Alt-A to deselect everything, B for box select, select all of these frames, hit S for scale to make this a much nicer curve shape. And now you'll notice it sort of like comes up and it eases in, which looks really nice, but I want these to sort of overshoot and then settle into place. Just trust me, I think it's a cool look for an animation. You'll see what I'm getting at in just a second. But if I B for box select, select these frames and scale these up now and rotate them a bit more, you'll notice that the letters now come up, overshoot, and then settle into place, which looks cool, but they all do it at the exact same time, which is boring AF. So we'll get to fixing the offset in just a second, but first let's finish our entire animation and then offset it for the per character animation. So I'm going to scrub all the way. Let's say we want these to be on frame for about a second, or you can go longer if you want. each letter to be on frame for a second. The entire animation is going to get longer than that, but we can go from 30. So 30 plus 60 is 90. So that'll be 1 second. Hit I on my keyboard, location, then scrub to frame 120, since that's another half of a second. Move these off frame, hit I on my keyboard, location, and you'll notice we have the same issue here, where it starts out slow, speeds up, then slows down. Well, since it's going off frame, we can just have it start slow and speed up and maximize the use of our keyframes to make a really appealing animation. So I'm gonna hit Alt-A, deselect everything, B to box select, click and drag around these frames, hit S to scale, 0, enter, then I'm gonna hit Alt-A to deselect those, B for box select, select these ones, scale these up to make a much nicer curve shape. Now you notice they ease out and then go off frame. And you have to picture anything past this border is not going to be visible in the final video. So the fact that these pop off like that and then just abruptly stop, nobody's going to see that. So this is what our audience is going to see. They're going to see it speed up, and then it's like they're going to think that it's just keep going. They're just speeding off the frame into infinity. Wonderful. So we have these coming on, overshooting, and then going off. I want the overshoot to be a little bit more dramatic, so I'm just going to tweak this. Again, animation is all about tweaking and having fun and coming up with something that you're happy with. So cool, they come up, they overshoot, they settle into place. Now let's do some offset. So for this, we're going to go to the dope sheet, which is the best place to adjust the timing of your animation. So I'm going to click this button right here, go to the dope sheet, and you'll notice we have all of our letters here. I'm going to collapse these down by clicking little spin down triangles. And we do have a problem here. If we deselect everything by hitting Alt-A, you'll notice all of our keyframes are still visible, and that's going to make offsetting them a little bit more tedious. So what I like to do is come up to this little triangle button and click it. That makes it so only the selected objects show up in the dope sheet, which is going to be really convenient for us in just a second. So to offset these, I'm going to B for box select, then click and hold my middle mouse button, drag, and that'll deselect it. You can also just select, shift click something until it deselects to deselect it, but box select middle mouse button is faster for me. So then I'm going to come over to the dope sheet, hit A to select everything, G for grab, 4 to move it over 4 frames. You can make the offset greater. I encourage you to experiment with it. I just found that 4 frames looks appealing to me. So then do the exact same thing again. B for box select, middle mouse button, drag the next letter, G4. Do this over and over again until we've done it to every letter except for the last. Yep, okay, cool. So now all of the letters are offset in the animation. So let's hit Shift left arrow to go back to frame 1, and let's watch our animation over here. So if I hit space, now the letters all pop up individually and you have a really nice looking per character text animation. Like so. And it says, hey, check out my Twitter, but it doesn't say it in a really obnoxious voice that makes it sound like you're cramming it down their throat. So this is great and all, but I want to illustrate here that you have a lot of creative freedom. You don't have to make them pop in from the bottom of the frame. You can make them pop in from the top of the frame. You could have them scale in. You could have them rotate and scale in. Really, you have a ton of freedom here. So for instance, just to pique your interest a little bit, let's do the scale in. So I'm going to select all of my letters, go to the dope sheet, delete all of these. And let's say we want them to scale in by frame 30. We already have this set to individual origins. So I'm going to hit I on my keyboard for scale. Go back to frame 0 or 1. Hit I on my keyboard, or S0 to scale them down first. Enter. I on my keyboard, scale. So now they scale up. Cool. Then we can go to frame 90, I, scale, go to frame 120, S0, enter, I, scale. And that looks fine. I want to add a little bit of an overshoot here again in the graph editor. So I'm going to hit Shift F6, or you can just go to the graph editor over here. Alt A to deselect everything. I'm going to box select the first frames, hit R to rotate those, click to apply, S to scale those to give us a little bit of an overshoot, and you can experiment with this as well. Maybe you want to overshoot it more. Overshoot this as much as you want. We can reframe the camera later as well, so that's not a big deal. Anyway, cool. They overshoot, settle into place, then scale out after a second. And you can have them on screen longer if you really want to draw people's attention to it. I'm going to leave mine in a second for now, just so it'll be nice and fast to render out. But cool. They scale up. Might be a little bit drastic. They scale up, overshoot, settle into place, go away. Now let's do the same offset thing we just did. And it's going to be hard to select objects that are scaled down to 0. So I'm going to set my time cursor here in the middle. Go to the dope sheet, which again is Shift F12, or just go to the dope sheet. Going to B for box select, middle mouse button, click drag, A, G4. Do the exact same thing we did for the movement keyframes, but this time it's for scale. And this is how you can do per character animation, and it looks really nice. Oh man, I forgot one thing, which was to have these ease out nicer. So if we go back to our graph editor, we can do the exact same thing we did earlier. And the beautiful thing here that you're gonna find is that we have this set to individual origins. So if we just do this after we don't have to redo anything. We don't have to undo anything or redo anything. We can just select them over here and make this look nicer, which might want to C for circle select, deselect those handles. It's not helping me much. Anyway, make that a much nicer curve. So now they scale into place with the overshoot, and then they ease out nicely. And this is all about tweaking. This is all about playing around. I want to encourage you all here to do what you think looks cool. So for instance, you might not like how they scale up completely. Maybe you just want them to bounce up vertically. That's pretty easy to do too. I could just go down to each individual letter drop down and delete make sure I'm in the center of the animation where it's settled in. But then just delete the X scale and the Z scale for each of these. So it's only scaling on the Y scale now. Again, tedious, I know, but once you get into the groove of it, it moves pretty quickly. And now if we go back to the beginning, that looks pretty cool too. So you have unlimited freedom here. You can animate any parameters of these text objects and then just offset the keyframes to make something that looks really neat. You could also offset them in a different order if you wanted to. So you could have it start at the edges and work and offset inward, which would look pretty cool. But anyway, that looks pretty cool to me. The next step is going to be to export this as a video file. And before we do that, we're going to want to take our camera and line it up with our text. So I'm going to drag our camera down so it's centered on the text. Then I'm going to make sure, I think the highest point of the frame that we need to compensate for is right here, where the logo is scaled up. So now I'm going to go to the printer icon, or camera printer icon. Yeah, scroll up. I always need to scroll up. I'm gonna change the Y dimensions of the camera down until it about fits. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect. The whole reason behind this is you just want to maximize your canvas space. You don't want a ton of extra transparent pixels because it bogs down your processor. So now if we hit play, scales out, you'll notice we have a whole bunch of extra frames here. So we're going to want to set the end of the animation to where this finishes. So somewhere around here, like 145 is good. This is going to depend heavily on how many letters your social media handle has, by the way. So if you have a bunch of letters, this is going to take longer. If you have less letters, it's going to take shorter. Mine just happened to be completely transparent at 145. This looks pretty cool. So now I can use this on my OBS stream. So let's get that set up. So we already set up the FFmpeg video WebM settings. So now we just have to choose an output location for this. I'm going to go to the folder. I'm going to go to the editing drive, StreamSchool, social pop-up. Set this to SP1 yo-yo. Hit enter twice to accept. Then I'm gonna go to render animation, and you will get this very nice window pop up that renders out your entire animation from start to finish. And you'll notice we have the nice motion blur that we opted for, which looks super cool. I'm really glad that Eevee finally has motion blur for objects. It always had camera motion blur, which is neat, but not as neat. So once that is completely rendered out, once it's rendered out the last frame, your video file will be wherever you specified under the output. So wherever you set this folder to, that will be where your video file is. So now we're gonna hop over into OBS. So I have my demonstration scene here. I'm currently using my camera to record this tutorial, so you get to see a beautiful picture of my face instead. But I'm gonna hit the plus button. I'm going to go to media source. I'm going to call this one Twitter Popup. And you can make as many of these with different logos as you want, and you can even have them in the same animation if you really want to. But I'm gonna do Twitter Popup. I'm gonna hit browse. I'm gonna find it. Mine is SP1 yo-yo. Double click that to open it. And we wanna make sure it shows nothing when playback ends for how we're gonna set this up with the Stream Deck. So hit OK. I'm gonna uncheck that for now so I can line this up better, but hit OK. It's gonna pop in. Notice it's really big. So I'm gonna scale this down, put it in the center here. And if we hide it and unhide it, it'll play again. And that looks pretty cool to me. We could even put this in the upper corner if we wanted to. You can put this wherever you want. It doesn't really matter. Now to set this up on a Stream Deck, what I typically do, or what I did for my stream and my follow animation, is I use the Stream Deck multi-action to unhide it. So I would do multi-action, Stream Deck multi-action, and I would unhide the source, do a delay, then hide the source. But there's actually a better way to handle this, so we can delete these. Now we can just say source deactivate, so hide the source first. This is gonna be under example scene camera, Twitter pop-up. Then we add source and activate for the exact same source. So rather than doing a timer and worrying about when it starts and stops, you can just deactivate it and activate it, and it'll work seamlessly. So now if we hop back into OBS and I pull out my Stream Deck here and click the button, it'll pop up, it'll go away. I can do that as many times as I want, whenever I want. You can also put this on slideshow, I think, in Stream Elements if you wanted to do it automatically occasionally. But I don't know, you could just be like, yo, if you want to see the sickest tweets around, go to twitter.com/cfolia. And all in all, that is how you can make a cool social media pop-up. Again, before we end here, I just want to really reiterate, please play around with it. Please have fun, explore. Don't just copy paste what I do. Like have some fun, come up with something really cool and unique. The options are limitless, and I believe in you. Hopefully at this point you have a cool new social media pop-up to use on your live stream. If you have any questions or just want to come hang out with an awesome community, I'm live at least every Friday at twitch.tv/oraclefishlive. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below the video and ring the bell for new content every single week. Until next time, my name is Chris Folia. I'm your stream scholar. Class is out.